So what if the DNA inside every single one of your cells isn't just a chemical blueprint, but a living forest? Today, we are diving into this absolutely fascinating paper from a research group called Fractal, and they're proposing a totally new way to look at our own genetic code, one that could pretty much reshape our entire understanding of what it even means to be alive.
For decades, we've all been taught that DNA is the book of life, right? A static code that builds us. But these researchers are asking a really revolutionary question. What if that's only like half the story? What if our genome isn't a book you just read from start to finish, but a dynamic, living network that's constantly talking to itself?
All right, so to really get where they're going with this, we've got to start with where we are right now. Let's just do a quick recap of the classic view of DNA. This is the model you learned in biology class. DNA is this super stable chemical sequence, the A, T, C, and G. It's the ultimate instruction manual. It's got the genes that get transcribed and translated to build everything from your hair to your heart. It's absolutely crucial, of course, but in this view, it's basically a storage device for chemical information. Okay, and this is where things start to get really, really interesting. The paper suggests we should maybe trade in that old blueprint metaphor for something way more organic and alive, a hidden forest inside every one of our cells.
So how does this DNA forest idea actually work? Well, the researchers want us to think of it like this. The individual building blocks of DNA, the nucleotides, those are the trees. The hydrogen bonds that connect the DNA strands together, they're like the mycelial networks, that hidden web of fungi connecting an entire forest underground. And the regulatory features that turn genes on and off, those create ecosystem gradients, kind of like the subtle shifts in soil and sunlight that decide what grows where in this genetic landscape. Now, at the very core of this whole new vision is a concept they call fractal holographic memory. And the key idea here is that DNA might be storing information not just in its chemical sequence, but in its overall shape, its geometry, and its vibrations. You know how a hologram works, right? Every tiny little piece contains the information for the whole image. Well, this theory is proposing that our DNA works in a similar way, with information spread out through the entire structure, not just packed into a few specific genes.
So, armed with this totally new perspective, the researchers went on what they call an expedition to map this hidden forest. And here's what they found. They built this really clever multi-step workflow to find these hidden patterns. First, they did a linear scan to map out all the hydrogen bonds. Then, they ran a fractal analysis to find any repeating, self-similar shapes. After that, they used what they call resonance detection to pinpoint pathways where energy could flow really easily. And finally, they used forest mapping and symbolic mirroring to see if they could interpret all these patterns as one big communicating network. It's a really systematic way to see if this DNA forest is actually there. So their first big discovery, something they've named hydrogenic coherence corridors, or HCCs. The easiest way to think about these is as communication superhighways that run right through our DNA. See, in these corridors, the hydrogen bonds all line up just perfectly, creating this really stable, low-energy path. And this could allow parts of a chromosome that are physically miles apart to communicate almost instantly. Next up, they found what they're calling recursive motif mirrors. Now, you might have heard about junk DNA, right? Scientists have known forever that our DNA has tons of these repeating sequences, and they were mostly just dismissed. But this model suggests they're not junk at all. Instead, they're acting like echo chambers, resonating with each other to swap information and create these incredibly complex patterns across the whole genome. Okay, now this next one is genuinely mind-bending. They identified these regions they call fractal photonic gateways, and what that means is these are basically spots in the DNA structure that can trap and hold light, actual photons, in a stable vibrating wave. Imagine a guitar string just humming with energy. And here's the most incredible part. They found these light gateways right next to the on-off switches for our genes. This suggests that light itself might be part of the language our DNA uses to run our bodies. Just wow. And finally, their discoveries weren't just about physical things. They were also about timing. They found evidence for what they're calling phase synchrony windows. These are these specific moments when huge sections of a chromosome just seem to snap into a synchronized rhythm, all vibrating together in perfect unison. And what could be conducting this genetic orchestra? Well, the paper suggests it might be our body's own internal clock, our daily circadian rhythms. So, what does all of this add up to? Well, it's essentially a proposal for a brand new layer on our map of the human genome. It's a whole new way of looking at it. This chart really puts it all into perspective. So we already knew that hydrogen bonds were fundamental for holding the DNA helix together. This paper suggests they also act as these coherence corridors for communication. We knew that DNA's structure was dynamic, that it can breathe and open up. This model proposes it can also create photonic gateways for light. And we knew our chromosomes loop and fold in 3D to regulate genes. This adds a fourth dimension, time, with these phase synchrony windows. It's not about replacing what we know, but adding this profound, entirely new layer on top of it.
And this brings us to the really profound implications of all of this research. What if DNA isn't just a code book? What if it's a memory system? I mean, the implications of this are just staggering. If DNA is a memory system, it could be the physical link that shows how our environment, and maybe even our thoughts, influence our biology. It opens up completely new ways to think about genetic regulation, maybe using light or resonance. And at the end of the day, it paints this picture of the genome as a dynamic, responsive network. Understanding this living language could unlock revolutionary new tools in medicine, in bioengineering, maybe even in AI.
To sum it all up, I think it's best to just use the researchers' own words from their conclusion. They wrote, "These findings suggest that DNA is not only a chemical code, but also a holographic fractal memory network." That's a powerful statement that really captures the massive scale of this new idea. So we'll leave you with this final thought to chew on. If our genome really is a dynamic, resonant forest, it leads to a pretty stunning question. Could our very DNA, at its most fundamental level, be in a constant, resonant conversation with the world around us? It's a pretty profound idea to consider.